Hello, my name is Salman Hamid, and I'm Assistant Professor of Integrated Science and Humanities at Hampshire College.
I'm Kevin Anderson. I teach courses in film and anthropology at the University of Massachusetts, and this is Film Autopsy. Hello, and welcome to a film autopsy of Zero Dark 30. New film written by Mark Boal, directed by Kathryn Bigelow, and produced by Mark Boal and Kathryn Bigelow. It is, most people have probably heard about this, the film at least, but certainly heard about the historical event that the film revolves around, which is the hunt for and then eventual tracking down and killing of Osama bin Laden. Now, Kathryn Bigelow is no stranger to very kind of terse, kind of male-centered military films. Her recent film, previous film, Hurt Locker, won Best Picture. She won Best Director. In this, we have Jessica Chastain in a fantastic performance starting off as a lower-level CIA analyst who is exposed to some of the techniques being used by the American intelligence agencies, namely using torture. So the film is based on historical fact. I think it's very well put together. I think Chastain's performance is fantastic. There's some great directorial choices made by Kathryn Bigelow. And for me, I felt that it is, considering the subject matter, it is a very mature and tempered way of handling such a controversial and delicate subject.
Yeah, I mean, it's so first of all, I mean, considering the fact that we kind of know the story, and this also happened just in 2011, so not that far back. The film, which goes over like 2.5 hours, it's gripping. I mean, and which is actually hard to do for that type of thing. And I mean, it's absolutely
when the audience knows the outcome.
Exactly, and especially and again, we are going to talk about spoilers because we are assuming that you do know kind of roughly what happened. Okay, so I mean, the last half hour or 40 minutes of the actual operation of getting Osama bin Laden. I mean, I think that is just so phenomenally done, and it is so thrilling in some sense. Okay, so that set aside, I mean, that is just done.
I don't know if I would say thrilling.
Well, but that's brilliantly done. I mean, when you are hooked onto it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you're like, okay, how is it going to happen? Even though you know what happens, right? And that, I think, was apparent in Hurt Locker also. I mean, I think that stuff comes in. Okay. At the same time, the question is, how do you feel about the film? And I think that's a bigger question with this film because, unlike Hurt Locker, which even though it was about Iraq war, but it sort of like focused very central on the bomb defusal unit. I think, and she managed to stay sort of like hands off, of like, hey, I'm not going to take a stance on the Iraq war.
Right.
I'm just going to talk about this particular person trying to defuse bombs.
Right.
I think with Zero Dark 30, she tries to do the same thing, but I think it's unsuccessful in some sense. And I don't know, and I think that will depend upon whether you call it unsuccessful or successful.
So I remember reading an interview with Kathryn Bigelow and Mark Boal, and they said, look, we are not making this film as any kind of political statement. Right. We want to make a film that focuses on the people who have their boots on the ground, the people who have to get their hands dirty, the people who carried out this hunt, this research, and then the eventual tracking down and killing of Osama bin Laden. So I do feel that the film, I don't know if I'd say it's apolitical, it's such a strong way to talk about it. I just felt that, again, because of the subject matter, let me go back to the scene when the Navy SEALs do raid the compound. It is so brilliantly done, and it is business. This is a job. They are not filled with emotion. It's not an act of revenge or carrying out justice. I mean, if it is going on, we don't know that. It is about these very well-trained individuals performing their duties at the top level, and that's what's so intense about it. There's no booming Saving Private Ryan music to it. Right. It's not necessarily framed as a heroic moment, nor is it condemning, the assassination of this, certainly horrible person. It's about business, and I thought that was that in itself, I think, was a tough choice for her to make.
Well, that part is fine, but what about the rest of the film, right? I mean, how do you frame that? And I think that's where the director does come in, the kind of choices you make. So, I mean, there has been a lot of debate about the use of torture, for example, and in some sense, I actually do think that the movie does take it into a gray zone whether torture does provide information or not. And in fact, you can argue that perhaps the movie argues that actually when they don't use torture, that's where they actually get information. Okay. At the same time, no character explicitly talks about it. And the only time there is a dialogue about that is when one of the major characters says that we stopped getting information once we stopped the enhanced interrogation. So I think so that's the framing that creates a problem. And so I think this is an issue, this is a topic which is so big, I think that you cannot avoid sort of like not dealing
making
with
some statement
about politics. And I'm actually worried in the sense that it almost, it is a Rorschach test for the audience. Right?
Absolutely.
Of how you feel about it.
Yes, you will project your own kind of preconceptions about torture, about the hunt for Osama bin Laden into this film. And it could be in absolutely opposing, kind of views of
so
that.
I had a chance to see Zero Dark 30 on the opening night at Times Square. And so this was in mid-December, and that was an interesting experience because within the movie, it also talks about the Times Square bomber.
Right.
So we are sitting in the theater, which would have been the target of the bomber over there, and right behind me, there was a whole row of Marines sitting and watching the movie. And I have to say, it was the atmosphere in the film was tense. The atmosphere in the theater was intense, and in fact, towards the end, it was just you could almost pluck out tension from the air. It was so thick, right? And one person did yell, for God and country at the end of the movie, including when Osama bin Laden was killed. At that time, also there was something like, we got him,
kind of
we
thing.
got him.
Yep.
At the same time, and again, that's where the complex emotions come in. People, when they were walking out, and remember, this was the opening night, so this was a selection bias of the people who are there, who are really interested in him. There was a melancholic atmosphere, mood. And partly it's because of the music also that is in there, where you are left with Jessica Chastain, the character Maya, who goes into this plane and she's asked, where do you want to go?
Yeah.
And that's where the movie ends. Yeah. And in some sense, she's the metaphor, allegory for America in some sense, frail and also impacted by 9/11.
Yep.
And now what?
Yeah, with
a
sense of accomplishment and maybe...
But at what cost?
Right, exactly. Well, I think it's an interesting moment at the end of the film, and also how she's framed. She's in a cargo plane. She's the sole passenger in this, and she's framed in this kind of medium close-up, and the background right behind her is that kind of that netting that you use to hold down cargo, and it's kind of flapping, and it's kind of flaying a little bit. It's not though it looks like it's torn, but to me it stood in for the American flag. I think there's a reminiscent pattern in the netting behind her, almost like an American flag, but there's pieces missing. And I thought it was, and that's just one moment in the film. The film is brilliantly made. I hear your point about can you make a film that deals with torture at a time when it's so highly debated and not really make a stand on it? Well, I think you can, because she did. And whether or not that's a good thing, I couldn't say at this point.
Well, okay, but here are a couple of more specific problems that I had with the movie. By the way, I should say, I loved the film. I think it's a really good film, but here are a couple of things, and that goes back to this issue. Here is a film that is of highly charged material, and so every decision that the director is making is crucial, right? And it is serving a plot. Two places where, and I haven't seen any critique of that, but again, I may be more sensitive coming from Pakistan, for example. One is the issue of Orientalism, and that is the kind of images, the way people show, Hollywood has shown traditionally also, of Arabs and people from the Middle East. And here, there is one scene in Kuwait, for example, and with one of the sheikhs.
Right. And the Lamborghinis.
The two things that always comes up with classic Oriental images is nightclub or women,
sexy women,
and sports cars, right? And this fit in so beautifully. Now, is it possible that those meetings actually happen? It's totally possible. But if those are the only two images you use, that's a serious problem, and that shows that Bigelow is unaware of those kind of images. And let me give you one more example.
Well, I want to go into
go
that
ahead. Okay,
example
go ahead. Tell me.
because I think she is showing within her film a range of Islam. And what we see in Afghanistan and Pakistan is quite contrasted to what we see in Kuwait. In Kuwait, let's call it westernized Islam. And there's nightclubs, there's women certainly wearing revealing dresses, there's alcohol being consumed, and there's men interested in sports. So I hear you, but I think it's part of her agenda to show a range of Islam, and not the entire
There are only
range.
two ranges in there. Either
Okay.
there are terrorists or it's women and sports car.
Westernized,
Those are not westernized.
materialistic.
Those are not really westernized. Those are the Sheikh images, the Arab
Yeah,
images.
okay.
Those are not exactly secular. This is not Tahrir Square, right? You know,
yeah.
if you want to show those kind of things, we should be able to see that. You don't see that. You see this elite Arab Sheikh. This is the Sheikh image, not an Arab image, secular Arab image, okay? And the second place, again, it's a small thing, and that is the way it depicted small images in Pakistan. And again, full disclosure, I mean, I go there once a year, like, you know, and so the American embassy scene where Jessica Chastain goes in and she has been designated to this back corner of the American embassy, and it's like basically a decrepit building, shelves behind her. She has to dust off her desk, and it's like, you know, bad situation. Let me tell you, I've been, because I was working in this astronomy society a long time ago in the 80s also. American Consulate, even in the 1980s, was one of the best buildings in Pakistan, okay? Today, when the American embassy is really important, okay, the idea that would be such like dusty place, something like, usually it has the most advanced places that can within it. You create a small America in there, okay? Now, why am I picking up on a small thing? It depends upon what they want to show. So the director wants to present or project a particular image of Pakistan. So this question of the range, actually she's not showing the range, because if you are trying to make a realistic film, be realistic. Know how U.S. embassies are, even in third world countries. And they are not like that. So those are type of things like, you know, it's like, okay, so you're trying to have it both ways. Oh, I'm making a really realistic film. I'm not taking any stance.
Well, what did we see recently that this reminds you of?
Argo.
Argo,
absolutely. And Argo had the same problem.
It bothered me a lot more in Argo than it did in Zero Dark 30. Maybe just because it was better filmmaking. I was so wrapped up in the story and the way Bigelow was telling this story that not that Argo is horribly put together, but I think when you compare Ben Affleck with Kathryn Bigelow, these two films, Zero Dark 30 is the much tighter, much more engrossing film. I think we need to move on because we are going to do an essay on Zero Dark 30.
But it's just, see the movie. I think for a topic like this, I think I'm so glad that it's Kathryn Bigelow that made the movie and not Michael Bay. Right?
I would have to agree.
So do see the movie. I think it's a very good film, but take this critique with you. And I think this is a movie that you will be talking days after you watch the movie. It's a really
even if it doesn't win the
film.
Academy Awards, it's perhaps one of the most important films of 2012.
So yes, go see it, despite our disagreements.